Quickly, before the video starts, I streamed this live over at twitch.tv/ballisticren, where I also play games. I stream weekdays at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, so come stop by and say hi. I can't wait to see you over there. Now on with the video. Okay, so, Electrician, only top secret Medal of Honor, Hiroshi, Hershey, Miyamura. Let's get into it.
All right, we talked about the Nisei in World War II, the Japanese Americans
Actually, I muted
despite being
myself.
discriminated against and interned because of their Japanese ancestry, would go off and not only fight for America, but become the most decorated unit.
Yes, but FDR was a perfect president. Everyone loves FDR, despite the fact that he, unconstitutionally imprisoned hundreds of thousands of American citizens.
In American history. Let's see what some of the Nisei were up to during the Korean War.
Ooh.
Today we're talking about Hiroshi Miyamura.
I wasn't even thinking about that. Because my assumption would be like, oh yeah, World War II wins. Because I already watched a Nisei video about these guys from him, so I would have assumed they would just like kind of broke apart. It wasn't really anything special anymore. So we'll see how that goes though.
AKA Hershey, World War II veteran, Korean War veteran, Medal of Honor recipient, and to the best of my knowledge and research, the only man whose Medal of Honor was ever classified as top secret.
I wonder why, because, okay, if this happened in Vietnam, okay, maybe, which I'm not even sure if any, because like McAfee Sog in Vietnam, but there's no top secret medals of honor there. So like, what did he do to where he got a warranted Medal of Honor? And the government didn't shut it down because of the top secret nature. Like, I guess maybe because it wasn't so top secret that, Congress didn't even know what was going on, because that's the thing. Like, I think that's the thing with the whole McAfee Sog, and why some of any veterans that he did talk about that participated in that whole group in Vietnam, they didn't get any medals of honor because the chain of command probably wasn't even fully on, like, in scope of the picture, because it was like multiple things, like I think Navy SEALs, even, of course, Green Berets because it's Army, probably throw some certain Marines in there, but yeah, so yeah, obviously those recommendations would go up the chain of command, but they couldn't say, hey, this operation was in Laos or Cambodia, so no one had a clue what they were talking about, so they just never gave those medals of honor. Whereas the chain of command is probably more informed on that, because there's no war crimes attached to it, like with, going to war in a neutral country, which, in all honesty, the North Vietnamese were doing it too, so, and probably first, so, I'm not sure if you'd consider reaction to a war crime in itself, or if you'd consider Laos or Cambodia neutral countries at that point.
Right after word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by...
I'll leave that up to your interpretation and legal scholars who are much more informed on those kinds of issues than me.
Element. Okay, look, you know what Element is. I know what Element
is. Okay, I'm going to skip the ad because, I mean, I've obviously heard of him. Just check out drinkelement.com, Fat Electrician. I'm sure the link is in the description if you go visit his channel and give it a view without me talking over it. But yeah, so I'm not sure if there's anything I could add to this, so I'm just going to skip along. Let's see. Okay.
Sample pack with your order. Now, back to the video.
Go try it.
Our story begins October 6, 1925, when Hiroshi Miyamura is born.
I'm not sure how close. Actually, he said something about packs and stuff. I'm not sure how close it is to Gamer Subs. If I was, represented by Gamer Subs, I'd go show that instead. Say, no, don't try it. Go try Gamer Subs. Gamer Subs. Go. But I'm not, so I have no financial incentive to pick or choose.
Gallup, New Mexico. He is one of 7 kids. He's the oldest son. He's got 2 brothers and 4 sisters.
Wait, hold on. Let me just double check. when he was born.
Our story
My
begins
bad.
October 6, 1925, when Hiroshi
Okay, 25.
Miyamura is born in Gallup, New Mexico. He is one of 7 kids. He's the oldest son. He's got 2 brothers and 4 sisters. His parents
Okay.
had migrated to America from Japan because his
Right.
father, who was from a very wealthy, upstanding family, decided that he was going to get married for love and not status, and married a woman that was beneath his class, and it
Right.
caused a huge rift in the family, so they moved to America. They
Okay.
came here with nothing. They worked their ass.
So I was like thinking maybe the whole married for love thing could have possibly been, oh, he married a white girl who's an American or something like that. So he has to leave the country to go be with her. Possibly. Because, yeah, again, like, you know, status. But it also makes sense within a purely Japanese context. And also, yeah, the guy didn't, yeah. I don't know. I guess it makes sense that he would be full Japanese, especially if he's in Nisei.
Off, eventually got enough.
Actually, I'm not sure how that would work because, like, if you have like a half Japanese guy who's like half white, and it's like, well, what do we do with him? He's clearly not particularly loyal to Japan. In fact, the Japanese probably actively hate him because he's mixed race, which most of the world does not like mixed race people. They are very ethno states don't like mixed race people, like Japan and Korea and a lot of countries actually. So I guess in that case, maybe they'd let it be a little more lenient because they'd be like, the dude's mixed race. He's not, or even mixed ethnicity. Maybe they'd give a little leniency. He's clearly not, you know, completely loyal to this country or that country or whatever. I don't know how that would work out. Like if any half Japanese people during World War II, you know, maybe got imprisoned because of their, I guess you could say, assumed race.
Money to start their restaurant. They had 7 kids. They embraced being American, and they raised their kids with the same values. Growing up, Hershey had a pretty normal childhood. The only real thing he ever struggled with was not a lot of people could pronounce his name, Hiroshi Miyamura, so in 6th grade, his teacher, who just legitimately could not bring herself to say the word Hiroshi for some reason, just started calling him Hershey, and the nickname stuck.
Yeah, like I have looked into Japanese somewhat, and I like because it's a more phonetic language, you know, like Hiroshi. You know, it's not like Hiroshi. Like, you know, we don't, you know, there's not those like vowel movements. So, or yeah, vowel. So, I mean, I guess it could take some getting used to like pronounce it like perfectly, like without accidentally slipping with vowel shifts. But I feel like Japanese, especially with its like 2 letter syllables and all that stuff, or 2 sound, because you know Latin alphabet versus kanji and all that, and like hiragana and all that. But yeah, that to me, I don't know. To me, it makes it actually relatively easy for pronunciation because it's like so simple. Like I'm able to like look at it and say, oh, this is a very simple structure. It's not like these 5-letter syllables that have weird pronunciation. Timothy. Present.
The other problem was he was kind of a runt. He was a small kid. He always wanted to play football, but he was so small the coaches wouldn't even let him play. So he went off and did well in track and boxing. So things are going great. His family migrated here from Japan. They started a business. They worked their asses off.
Right.
Successful kids. They're achieving the American dream. But then when he's in high school, Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. And then pretty much immediately FDR steps in or wheels in and issues Executive Order 9066.
Yeah.
Execute Order 66.
Which, if you don't know, is basically the American...
I love because he's talked about Order 66 and Executive Order 9066 or whatever, and like this whole conspiracy of, you know, George Lucas basing the empire off of FDR's, like, you know, internment camps and stuff. I find that funny. Obviously, I don't buy completely into that. I think maybe I'd have to watch an interview to see if he even talked about where he got the idea for like Order 66 and all that stuff. But probably not too closely related.
American government steps in and tells all of the Japanese Americans, hey, you're going to have to go live in an internment camp for all of World War II. If you have a job, you got to quit. If you have a business, you have to abandon it, lose your house, lose your entire life, go sit inside of a military internment camp. So it's kind of looking like that's what's going to happen to Hershey and his family. They're going to lose the restaurant. They're going to have to live in an internment camp. Life is going to suck. But then Gallup, New Mexico had their city council and their mayor write a letter and send it to Congress and the president demanding that they not intern their Japanese citizens because those are Americans, and it actually worked. So
good for them. Good for them that it is their right as Americans, especially if they were born American, to be here. You know, they went through the process. They came here through legal means. They got American citizenship legally, and they didn't commit any heinous acts that would warrant it. Well, at least for the immigrants, that would warrant their denaturalization. You know, they didn't like do some sort of treasonous thing that's like, okay, well, now we got to denaturalize you and deport you because that's the thing. Like, as long as that's being done, then yeah, be here. It's just, but yeah, you obviously have to protect yourself too. But if these are American citizens, these are natural born or naturalized American citizens, especially for the naturalized citizens, they didn't do anything wrong, then they shouldn't be punished.
FDR and his best efforts, Hershey and his family get to go on living a pretty normal life.
Okay.
Buh, you always badmouth FDR. He's one of the greatest presidents in American history. Buh. No, he isn't.
No, yeah, exactly. No, he isn't. Case in point, the internment camps for American citizens. I don't even think this was even a thing about, oh, these are immigrants or not. And we can't trust immigrants because immigrants might sell us out to the Japanese. It's like, no, I'm pretty sure anyone with Japanese ancestry went to an internment camp, except the ones in Hawaii, because Hawaii's economy depended on it. But yeah, FDR, I don't get the love for him. The only thing he did well was win World War II. Most of World War II. He died before it ended, but you know, that's neither here nor there. But that's the only thing you could argue he did well.
He's literally the closest thing America's ever had to a dictator, okay? He's the only president.
He stayed in for 4 terms. I guarantee you he would have been a lifelong dictator if he had the chance, because I don't trust politicians. They're corrupt and they love power. He's literally the reason why there's only 2 full terms allowed. You could squeeze in a third one, but it's got to be like at most a half, and that needs to be your first term with certain circumstances, so on. But so in theory, yes, you could have a 10-year president still. You could have a 2.5-term president, but of course, like I said, certain criteria in that regard would have to be met. But yeah, FDR was not this great president that everyone remembers him as. His economic policies were bad. His racial policies, case in point, were bad. I don't get why people like idolize this man, probably because we teach that he was a good guy when he really, really wasn't. I guarantee he would have gotten a 5th term if he was alive to see it. Or at least tried to. Maybe the Democratic Party would have been like, nah, those were special. Because that's the thing, like before FDR, what was it, Truman? Or Eisenhower, one of those two. Yeah, Eisenhower, I believe. The only reason that before then you didn't have these 3-term presidents, despite some trying, was because the parties would never allow more than 2 terms. The president was set with Washington, and the established parties said, "Hey, you're trying to run for a 3rd term? Nah, that's not how it works." And now Teddy Roosevelt ditched the Republican Party and tried to run for a 3rd term after his successor royally fucked up running the country, at least in Teddy's image. But so it was like, you know what, I'm going to run for a non-consecutive 3rd term. And since he was a 3rd party, that didn't really work out for him. But yeah, So it's possible that the Democratic Party would be like, FDR, you ain't getting this fifth term. These were special circumstances, wartime circumstances that we allowed you to run a third and fourth term. You're not doing it again. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, dude, this is turned into a rant and I'm repeating myself, but it's like, dude, I really don't like this guy and I really wish the American people didn't. And I really would like to believe that FDR living longer than he did would be denied his inevitable desire for fifth term because politicians are corrupt. I don't trust any politician. I've never have. Even old politicians like FDR, Teddy Roosevelt himself, which Teddy Roosevelt's like among one of my most favorable presidents. He wasn't so openly corrupt, I don't think, but yeah, even Washington, I have my doubts on his because that's the thing, power corrupts, or the corrupt are attracted to power, whatever the case may be, and yeah, someone with multiple decades of power is not going to walk out being like, you know what, I was a good person. Like, they might dilute themselves into believing they were, but they're not.
2 terms. He served 4 terms and had to die to get removed from office, just like a dictator. In 1933, he forcefully confiscates all of America's gold at $20 an ounce, and then in 1934, after he's confiscated all the gold, they passed the Gold Reserve Act saying that gold is now worth $35 an ounce.
I wonder what motive that would have had on him. I wonder how much money he made off of that personally, because I'm sure he gave none of that to the government. I'm sure the government itself, to function properly, none of that money was given to the teachers' unions or anything like that. Interesting, I'm sure. Now, of course, that's my opinion because I'd have to do research into how that money was distributed, and really, I don't really want to. But yeah, interesting. Why didn't he just peg it at $20 that he bought it for?
Thousands of Japanese, German, and Italian Americans with no due process. During the Great Depression, he ordered farmers to burn their crops while people were starving so that he could artificially inflate the crop value.
Yes, the best president ever. The president that deserves to be immortalized in a monument. I hate this guy with a passion. I just knew his like economic policy was not good. I didn't know how deep it ran.
You know, that's good for the economy. Who cares if people are starving? And then when the Supreme Court stepped in and said that that was unconstitutional, he turned around and threatened to pack the Supreme Court if they didn't pass his policies. Social Security, which, unpopular opinion, is a giant fucking Ponzi scheme. He created the...
Yeah, yes. So, Social Security, I think, maybe possibly could work. Maybe if you had a system where, you know, well, first of all, you don't trust the taxpayers to spend their own money. That's a first warning sign. Or wisely invest in it. How about you teach the taxpayers how to invest their money wisely rather than just take it, spend it on ridiculous government programs that don't get the money back, and then rely on the next generation to fund their parents or grandparents' Social Security. You know, why don't you actually invest that money into like the S&P 500 or something that actually grows instead of investing in like pointless bridges that go to nowhere or you know, government buildings that are never used and just built to spend Social Security money, you know? Or maybe you just let it sit in the bank and build interest through just sitting in the bank. And then when the elderly turn into Social Security age, they are able to collect their money that was always theirs, and they don't have to take their children's and grandchildren's money to compensate. And again, that was fine when the baby boomers were funding their parents, and maybe even when Gen X had to start funding the baby boomers, but now millennials and Gen Z, who are not having kids nearly as efficiently for or whatever as their parents and grandparents, it's like that money is going to run dry. Because when you rely on someone else to fund your life, you're reliant on them, being alive to do it. So, or at least being populous or rich enough to do it. And millennials and Gen Z are neither populous enough nor rich enough to fund baby boomers and Gen X's Social Security. So, I mean, that's the truth.
The NFA because he doesn't like the Second Amendment, and then somehow he gets credited for any.
Oh yeah, National Firearms Act that bans any automatic gun at all. Which, it's like, if you want to pass gun control, in my opinion, because it's pretty clear that it says, in the Second Amendment, you're allowed to own a gun. That's simply what it basically boils down to. It doesn't say or arm in general. It doesn't specify what kind of arms or anything like that. It just says you're allowed to keep and bear arms, including things like cannons. So you assume that would extend to modern guns too. So the NFA, in my opinion, is unconstitutional because now, like I said, this isn't supposed to be like a gun control, like, whatever. If you want gun control, whatever. I'm not here to get into a political debate. I'm just saying as a word of law is written, yeah, probably unconstitutional.
Great Depression, when most economists and historians all unanimously agree that his policies prolonged the Great Depression and
exactly.
World War II that pulled us out.
Yep.
So no, I don't like
because it's almost like exporting things that other countries need to those other countries is exponentially more profitable than like insular economics. Like, for example, there is no like economic value in building a bridge. So when like FDR introduced, oh yeah, we're going to give all these people government jobs where they're going to build bridges and monuments and stuff. There's no economic value, at least not inherently. Maybe the bridge, you could argue, well, it allows people to cross places more efficiently, get jobs more efficiently, work more efficiently, save fuel, blah, 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 whatever the case may be. Okay, fine. But how about monuments and government buildings and all that have no immediate economic value? Like, all you're doing is trying to like protect jobs. You're not, and that's it. You're not actually thinking about the economic weight that those jobs are providing to the rest of the economy.
FDR, I have my reasons. Quit interrupting my story.
Wow, dodged a bullet there, huh?
Oh yeah, MacArthur, terrible general. Where were we?
Anyways, Hershey
I think I got off on a little tangent more than him.
On, graduates high school, and immediately tries to enlist in the United States military because that's what everybody's doing. He's an American. He wants to go off and fight for his country just like everybody else. So that's what he does. In 1942, he goes off and tries to enlist in the United States military, and they inform him that he is classified as 4C, which means he is an enemy alien and he is not allowed to serve in the United States military. So that kind of sucks, but then, like a year later, he receives a draft notice. What Hershey didn't know is while he was being classified as an enemy alien, the United States Army was working on propping up the 442nd Infantry, which was a segregated unit that was almost exclusive.
So this is the Nisei unit. I don't remember the unit number off the top of my head. I just context clues and all that.
Made for the Japanese Americans that had been born in America, also known as the Nisei. I did a whole video on it, but if you haven't seen it, basically these guys would go on to prove not only are they 100% Americans, they're some of the biggest badasses to ever walk the face of the earth because they went on to be one of, if not the most decorated combat units in American history. And now that that's up and running, they could. It's
kind of interesting how, now of course these people are obviously detached from Japanese culture, at least to some degree. But clearly not enough to, completely abandon the Bushido code of, never surrender.
So Hershey,
never surrender until you're dead, which that's the army. The Marines are a whole military branch that operates under that code of ethics or honor or whatever you want to call it.
Officially gets inducted into the United States Army on January 13th, 1944. He goes off, does basic training in Florida.
So he got in there late. I think that Nisei were activated well, I'm not sure if they were activated to like active duty very soon into the war, but I feel like they were created relatively quickly in general, I believe. Maybe the draft just didn't catch up with him because like I think it was initially a volunteer thing.
He is then sent to Camp Shelby in Mississippi for advanced infantry training. After that, they're getting ready to go to war. He's kind of excited. They pull him into a room. They interrogate him, trying to make sure,
Right.
to make sure he's not a spy or a.
I mean, that's. I think that should be expected with any soldier, at least when the country is actually at war. Make sure the enemy hasn't got them in their back pocket, because this could happen with like some British civilian that's kind of disgruntled with the British government. Is all of a sudden selling out to the Germans, and all, and you can't have that. So honestly, doing that with any citizen is a reasonable expectation. Now, I'm sure they use the excuse of him being Japanese and war with Japan and such as an excuse, as a stronger excuse, and especially if they weren't interrogating the white soldiers or even the non-Japanese Asian soldiers or black soldiers, But that, assuming you're doing it across the board, that would be a reasonable ask, because again, you got to vet your soldiers, make sure they're not spies.
Traitor of some kind. During that interrogation, he said, and I quote, "I don't consider myself a Japanese from Japan. I classify myself as an American from New Mexico." Then, as everybody else that he just graduated infantry school with is getting sent off to their units, he
Right.
and like 5 other dudes get pulled off to the side and are informed that they are all 18 or 17, and you have to be 19 to go overseas. They don't get to go yet. So instead, they
Why? They're enlisted soldiers. Why wouldn't they be sent overseas? Like, is there something I'm missing? Like, what's with the age cutoff? Because it's like they're soldiers. They did their training. They're soldiers. They're ready to fight, and you allowed them to become soldiers. So I don't know, mate. Like, what are you going to do? Throw them in like the National Guard or something? Like, what's the point at that point if you're not going to use your soldiers?
send him off to more training. He goes to 13 weeks of heavy weapons training where
Okay.
he become a machine.
I mean, obviously, if you choose to become a specialist in that regard, like if you want to become like, an army engineer or an army specialist in this, in machine gunnery or whatever, then sure, the army will be like, okay, fine, we need machine gunners, we need tank drivers, so on and so forth. So we'll send you off to do that. But if he was just thrown there because he's too young, again, I don't get why they're not. He's old enough to join the army. I don't know why he isn't old enough to go overseas. I don't. There's no, because that's another thing. There was no immediate threat of like a mainland invasion, really. So it wouldn't make sense to hold, the new guys back for that reason. I don't get what's going on myself. But again, I'm not a trained historian, especially in World War II. So
gunner, which is the perfect role for him. Okay, small guy. I know, like the common consensus is you're always picturing the machine gunner as like the big jacked corn-fed guy.
yeah, that's how a submachine gun like a Tommy gun works. But a normal machine gun, you don't lift. You keep on a tripod, static, and just fire from a mounted position.
From Nebraska, almost never is that guy the machine gunner. Okay, that's the dude kicking the door. The machine gunner every single time is like the 6'2", 110-pound white guy with the birth control glasses that's constantly ripping cigarettes.
Birth
or
control?
the small,
What?
nerdy guy every single time. So Hershey goes graduate
In real life, yeah, because those are the guys who are too twinky or whatever to be able to actually like do all the heavy lifting. So they're just like, sit here with the mounted machine gun. If anyone comes over, just let it rip.
Graduates heavy weapons school. Now he's 19 years old. They're getting ready to send him over to Europe, and then
Okay, now he can go.
And the doctor's like, "You have a hernia," and he's like, "I don't even know what that is. Didn't know I had one. I'm fine. Send me." And the doctor's
I don't really understand what that is too much. Like, I've heard of them. I think I maybe have researched them once or twice, but yeah, I'm not. I mean, herniated. Maybe if I had to guess based off like hearing things like herniated discs and stuff, maybe it has something to do with that. But like, I can only assume. Again, I haven't heard. It's not a medical term that comes into my vocabulary too often, so I don't really have much experience even hearing the word, much less understanding it completely.
Like, no, you have to go get it fixed. So he goes, gets his hernia fixed with surgery, takes months to recover. Okay, now he's good. He's ready to go. He gets on the boat. They send him over to Europe. He gets 5 days out from landing in Europe, and the entire ship is informed that Hitler has just surrendered.
He died.
Immediately, the rumor goes around.
Yeah, he didn't surrender. He died. Germany surrendered, but Hitler didn't.
This ship's going to whip a U-turn and they're going to head off to the Pacific, but that never actually happens. They go into Europe. He then spends a period of time basically doing guard duty at German POW camps. Then he gets orders, pack your shit up. We're sending you to the Pacific. He's like, sweet, okay. Starts packing his stuff up, starts getting ready, takes a couple of days.
Let me guess. Japan surrendered just right as he's getting ready to do that.
And then they cancel the orders because Japan also just surrendered.
Yep. I mean, I guess because the Nisei were never sent to Japan because, I mean, Japanese people fighting Japanese people, like, outside of the, racism aspect of, World War II, having like a dead American soldier of Japanese descent and then you have like a Japanese nationalist stumble across his body, change uniform, or even a white soldier for that matter, change uniforms into the American thing, and they're like, oh, it's clearly an American soldier who's a Japanese American soldier, obviously. Like, the white guys would be like that, or even the other Japanese guys would be like that, not understanding that, no, this is just a Japanese national that disguised himself as an American. So, from that aspect, yeah, it makes sense why you wouldn't allow the Japanese, or maybe even, because again, like, to a white guy, maybe all Asians look the same or something like that. So, like, barring all Asians even from fighting in the Pacific for that reason.
That's it. That was his World War II. He packs his shit up. He heads back home to America, starts his life. When he gets back home to America, he decides that he wants to stay in the Army Reserve, which is what he does. He also goes off to college, comes back home. He's working as an
becomes a commissioned officer after this because college.
Mechanic, meets his wife Terry. They get married in 1949. They start having kids. Everything's going fine. Around
then,
the same time
1949. I wonder what happens next year. As a military reserve officer.
3-year Army Reserve contract was about to be up, and he decided that he was going to re-enlist for an additional 3 years without running it by his wife.
You what?
So she's obviously not very happy that he didn't run that decision.
I wish you
what's
what?
the big deal? He's been in the Army Reserve the entire time she's known him. It's just some
Okay.
training, a couple weekends a month, some little bit of time in
Right.
the summer, a little bit of an adventure for him. What's the worst thing that happened?
A new war. Yeah, the worst happened.
So like 3 months later, the Korean War starts, and he immediately gets activated and sent to California. Obviously, his wife is upset. He's like,
Yeah.
babe, it's not that big of a deal. I have experience. I was in World War II. I've been doing.
I have experience. I was in World War II as a guard because I was able to actually be activated way too late in the war to actually do anything consequential. It's going to be fine. It was in fact not fine. Actually, I don't know. Maybe it was more or less fine for him. He lived long enough at least to receive that Medal of Honor. He showed the footage.
This for years. They're probably sending me to California to just train new recruits. I'll be safe. It'll be fine. Then his orders get changed. He's still going to California, but only after he goes to Fort Hood, Texas for a 9-week refresher course on infantry tactics.
Okay.
Not looking good. It's okay. They're probably
okay, obviously I'm not in the Army. I've never been in the Army, but honestly, a refresher on infantry tactics, if he's going with the assumption that he's going to instruct, then honestly the refresher probably isn't the biggest thing to worry about. Maybe you're like, oh, there's a chance, but there's also a possibility that I'm becoming activated as an instructor. I need to touch up on my infantry training. It's going to be fine. No war.
Making sure he gets the refresher course so he can go up to California and train all the new recruits. That's probably what's happening.
Exactly.
He goes, finishes the 9-week refresher
That's
course.
what I'd probably assume as well. But then again, like, here's the thing. Like, all these like older guys who become like instructors are guys with experience. Like, you know, um like a World War I, World War II ace is going to be the flight instructor for World War II in the case of World War I, or Korea or Vietnam in the case of World War II. A, a an Air Force pilot, well, I guess it would have been Army Air Force before the Korean War. Um, an Air Force pilot that has never actually seen active combat because it's been 10 years since the last war and he enlisted 11 years ago, did his training, and the war ended. Um, he has no reason for the government to believe he'd be a good instructor, or especially an exceptional one, because he has not shown his combat uh, capabilities. So that's the thing. Like without those credentials, the government's going to look at him like, you have no combat experience. Why would we trust you with an instructor, like a relatively safe instructor position? Nah, you're going off to war.
Then they put him on a train headed for California, and wouldn't you know it, the train stops in Gallup, New Mexico, and he goes up to his commanding officer and is like, hey, I live like 3 blocks from this train station. Can I run home and say hi to my wife? And the commanding officer, being cool as shit, is like, yeah, but when you hear the train whistle blow, you better fucking be on this train. So he takes off running, runs home, gets to spend 15 minutes with Terry before he has to run back to the train and is sent off to California. Gets to California, he is then told that he is not training new recruits. He is going to Japan for a little bit of more training, and then his ass is going to Korea to be a machine gunner. And now he's got to tell that to his wife. So he gets attached to the 3rd Infantry, gets shipped off to Japan. He's training with his unit, and while
I'm sure it's from that movie because 3D animated Scooby-Doo. That's my guess.
There he meets another machine gun section leader, a sergeant by the name of Joe Anello, and they become best friends. They finish up training, they get shipped off to Korea, and they go straight into combat. First time Hershey sees combat, he's ordered to take his machine gun section up onto a ridge that's overlooking the Yalu River. Once he gets up, they're ordered to dig in and hold that line as long as they possibly can. Got it. Guys, Hershey included, and they are dug in on this ridge overlooking this river, and across the river, he can just see
18 guys. I wonder how many. So is that like in one nest? Or is that like dispersed? Like, okay, like we're going to take 4 guys per machine gun nest, because I think that's the thing. You need like, obviously the machine gunner, then you need like the guy, loading the belts and swapping out the belts and all that, and maybe a guy arming used belts to be recycled, so to speak, to then be used again. Because like, let's say you have 2 belts, 100 rounds of ammo. Each belt has like 20 cart ammo, whatever. And you could just like cycle the belts through. Like, again, never operated machine gun, so I'm not, because like a magazine, for example, it's reusable. I'd assume a machine gun belt would be 2. So I'm not if so, I'd imagine they'd have at least one guy on like reloading the belts for reuse.
Hundreds of enemy tents. This is their whole staging area, and this river is where they got to try to hold this line. That night at midnight, they hear a bunch of bugle calls going off and what he describes as trash can lids being smacked together before hundreds of wet commies just come storming up this ridge, trying to get him and his guys. Hershey and his guys just get completely overwhelmed by the sheer number of enemies coming at them. He's only got 15 dudes, including himself, and they are sending hundreds his way. They're able to get some air support. They're able to hold it for a little while, but eventually they get overrun and their own air support starts strafing their position as well, at which point he has to call.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you want to be behind the air support because there's going to be like some spillover. So you want to make sure you're out of range of that, because it's like, okay, hit this coordinate. Well, some of, the hits are going to be to the left, right, up, down, whatever, like north, south, east, west of that coordinate. So you want to make sure you're clear of it, very much clear of it, in case that happens. Well, when the area, when you're like constructing, okay, we need to get closer and closer to our position. At some point, you're going to start strafing your position.
and issues a retreat. He never did get to find out why they started strafing his position, whether they thought he was completely overrun, because he definitely didn't call for them to attack his position, but
Okay.
whatever. One thing's for sure, this is a giant clusterfuck. Him and his guys make a clean getaway. From here, they are told to get on a ship, and they're being sent to a port at a place called Hungnam in North Korea. Hershey doesn't realize this yet, but him and his guys are being brought in to support the Marines that are fighting at the Chosen Reservoir, which I've also done an entire video on. I
feel like, I assume the Chosin Reservoir was pretty early into America's involvement, because up until that point, the South Koreans had been getting their butts whooped by the North Koreans, pushed to like the end of the peninsula, and then the Chosin Reservoir, what's it called? Like in Incheon, I believe, was, invaded amphibiously, like with D-Day by the Americans, and the Americans pushed into the Chosin Reservoir eventually. Now, of course, that's probably in the span of months or so. So, I mean, new or not, whatever. But yeah, I feel like this would have been pretty early in the war, like with all the residual training and all that he did. I thought that would have been after that.
Abbreviated version of what's going on. General MacArthur tells the Marines to penetrate way farther north than they should. They get within 40 miles of the Chinese border. The Chinese sends like 200,000 soldiers south to attack the Marines. They get surrounded. They have to fight their way out, and the only way they're going to get out.
And MacArthur is regarded as one of the best generals ever, except from the people who actually served under his command.
Out with their lives is if they can make it to the port at Hungnam so they can get evacuated, and Hershey is going there to support that. That's exactly what happens. Hershey and the 3rd Infantry show up. They set up a perimeter around Hungnam. They get the Marines in there. They get the Marines loaded on ships. They get the civilians loaded on ships. Everybody's crammed in there like sardines. Hershey and his guys board one of the last ships out, and then they blow up the entire city on their way out to deprive the enemy of nice things.
Look at that, huh?
Wait, is that Tropic Thunder? Hold on, let me... Yeah, maybe.
Look at that, huh?
Like, obviously only on the foreground.
From here, they're shipped back down south.
I think it might be.
Get off the ship, then they are ordered to go and basically invade North Korea again, and he spends about a month fighting further and further into North Korea. By mid-April 1951, the Chinese and the North Koreans have launched their spring offensive. They're going to throw everything they have at the American lines, and Hershey and his guys are ordered to fall back to the Imjin River. They cross the river, headed back south. Then they're ordered to hold the ridge there.
I mean, yeah, strategic fallback, like especially to some important landmark like a river that offers very good, relatively good. I mean, I'm not sure with modern technology and all that. Defenses, yeah, that's probably a good move. Like, obviously, it's like, okay, we're 40 miles out from the river, but we're in a field. That's not great for defense. So they're about to do a defense, fall back to the river where you have better natural defenses on your side, and we'll be all good. And so, obviously, strategic retreats like that are a good thing.
With the river as long as they can. Hershey's in charge of a 13-man machine gun squad and is given 4 extra riflemen for a total of 17 guys. He's got his section that he's holding, and his buddy Joe Anello is holding his machine gun section off to the right, and it's just the entire American forces standing in a line with machine guns trying to hold it as long as they can. That's the strategy. So they go there, they get dug in, they build trenches, they build fortifications. Hershey has his guys go down by the river and set up tripwires and flares that'll set off if the enemy starts coming their direction, and then they just wait. And for a couple of days, nothing really happens. They're just up there on this cliff face, hanging out in a trench, freezing their ass off the entire time. But then, around midnight on April 24th, 1951, he hears it again. Bugles, trash can lids, yelling, and he's like, fucking here we go.
Bring it on.
Minutes after that, the Chinese hit the trip flares, light up the battlefield, and Hershey issues the order to light them up. And within a couple of minutes, his machine gunner looks at Hershey and says, "It's too hot here. I'm gonna leave." And Hershey's like, "What the fuck?" And the dude just leaves. He abandons his post. So Hershey mans the gun himself, by himself, which is a 2-man job. He then proceeds to engage this enemy wave by himself with his machine gun until the gun jams because he doesn't have an assistant gunner helping him feed ammo when it's midnight and he can't see shit. He's looking at this machine gun nest. There's 10 guys left running right at him. He's not going to be able to unjam this gun in time, so he grabs his M1 with his bayonet, leaves the machine gun nest, and engages 10 enemies by himself. And proceeds to kill 10 of them in close quarters combat with his rifle and bayonet. He then, with a lull in the battle, runs to his second machine gun position. When he gets there, the machine gunner's fucking gone, and there's some riflemen there holding the position. He looks at the riflemen and is like, where the fuck is the gunner? And they're like, I don't know.
What's with all these gunners abandoning their post? I mean, I get it. The Korean War is a pointless war, in my opinion, and we should have never been there, and all these guys who got drafted probably didn't want to be there and all, but at the end of the day, you're still an American soldier with a job to do.
He later found out that they decided to fall back after a grenade made it into their machine gun nest, but he doesn't know that right now, so he remans the gun and continues engaging the enemy.
Okay, that's the second machine gun nest he ran into, or was that his? I'm gonna say it's the second one, but then what happened to his guy? Unless it was like something like it went between nests. His machine gunner caught the grenade in like his peripherals and was like, yeah, I'm getting the fuck out of here. But yeah.
They continue fighting. We don't know how long, but Hershey describes it as, quote, quite a while, which under these circumstances could have been 5 minutes or it could have been 5 hours. We have no clue. Eventually, Hershey comes to the realization they're about to be completely overrun. They can't stop them all. They're able to penetrate around the perimeter. Eventually, they're going to be completely surrounded any minute. And this is where Hiroshi Miyamura makes the decision that he's going to order all of the rest of his men to retreat, and he's going to hold back the enemy while they do so. And that's exactly what he does.
That
last time his men saw him, they were making their retreat.
Is a death sentence.
As they watched Hershey engage wave after wave of enemy soldier with his machine gun, his M1 bayonet, and grenades. Not only does Hershey hold back the enemy long enough for his men to make a clean getaway, he holds the enemy back for so long that he starts getting his position hit by American artillery because they think he's dead. At this point, Hershey's like, time to fucking go, grabs his M1 and bayonet and starts running through the trenches, starts running through the trails, eventually turns a corner and runs face first into a massive silhouette. It's dark, can't really see who it is, doesn't fire, thinking it's obviously an American because this dude's way too big to be a starving communist. He then sees the Chinese communist Winter Soldier hat and then sees that he has a grenade in his hand and immediately lunges forward, stabs him, and then fires. When he fires, he stumbles back and falls flat on his back. He then feels the grenade hit his leg and he kicks it back towards the guy. It blows up. He takes shrapnel to his leg, but he doesn't know that yet. Jumps back up and starts running.
Dude, that's the thing. Adrenaline. Jesus. He probably can't even feel that he's wounded.
Towards American lines as fast as he can. He's making his way there. He makes it like 500 yards and he sees an American tank off in the distance. So he starts running towards the tank because obviously that's going to help in this situation. And as he's making it there, he gets a couple of yards away and runs into a barbed wire entanglement in the darkness. Ooh. Barbed wire, he's getting all cut up. He's screaming and yelling and waving at this tank, but the tank motor's on. They can't hear him. And they rumble off. In hindsight, he said that was probably a good thing because he was an Asian guy on the wrong side of the barbed wire. They might have just shot him. Regardless, true. Barbed wire doesn't know what to do. The entire
and that goes to like why, and that again, that goes to the practical reason of why did they have the Asian soldiers fighting Asians? Because like I said, the white soldiers, black soldiers, whatever, they're an Asian is an Asian is an Asian to them, especially an East Asian. Now, like I said, and I should reiterate, like, well, first of all, white people generally have different distinctions, like, you know, blonde hair versus brown hair versus whatever other colors of hair. Asians are actually it seems like Asians are pretty similar ethnically, so to speak. So it's a lot harder to tell, like, at least with East Asians, such. It's probably a lot harder to tell, like, a Korean from a Japanese guy. him being Japanese in Korea, they're going to think he's a Korean soldier, blah, 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 you know. But, yeah.
Completely overrun with enemy soldiers. They're everywhere, so he just finds this little gully, lays down, and
Okay.
tries to hide. He's laying
Right.
there for about an hour. It starts to get light out, and then he keeps laying there, He's hearing footsteps. He's hearing enemy soldiers talking, and then eventually it gets quiet for a little while, and he's like, okay, maybe they moved on. Might have made it through this. And then
Okay.
cutting through the silence, he hears in perfect English, "Get up, you're my prisoner now."
What?
So he quits playing dead. He turns around, he looks. It's a Chinese officer that's somehow speaking perfect English, but
What?
he turns over his weapon, and then they start marching him to God knows where. He's definitely feeling his leg wound now. He's limping. They march him back to his old position, and there is like 40 to 50 dead enemies laying on the field where he made his last stand. They keep marching. They go past his original position. There's more dead guys. We would later find out that it was confirmed by Allied forces that had retaken this area, and he was officially credited with killing over 40 enemies, 10 of which was in hand-to-hand combat with M1 Grand and bayonet.
Yeah, I stabbed a man in the
Ooh.
heart. I saw that. Brick killed a guy.
They keep going past those positions. They keep marching him further and further into enemy territory when they finally link up with another unit, and they throw him in with 8 other POWs that are Americans, and everybody's wounded. And in that group of 8 other POWs, wouldn't you know it, one of them is Joe Anello, and he is jacked up. He's been shot in the legs.
Ooh.
He's been hit with a grenade. He is not doing good. He can't even walk on his own. Hershey, even though he's also jacked up, starts giving first aid to all the other men the best he can with what little he has.
Right.
And after a while, the interpreter, the Chinese guy that for some reason speaks perfect English, comes back up and says, hey, here's the deal. We don't have enough prisoners to send you guys back to an actual POW camp yet, so you're just going to follow our infantry until we capture more prisoners, and then once we have enough, we'll send you marching back to a POW camp in North Korea. So they do what they're told. It's the only
Sounds like a perfectly good idea. There's no one that could possibly maybe pull off an escape.
thing they can do. They
At
get
all.
They start following this enemy infantry battalion as they try to penetrate further into American territory. The problem is Joe Anello, his best friend, can't walk. So Hershey carries him for 10 miles. Obviously,
Ooh.
carrying another grown man for 10 miles is a task in that of itself, but
Yeah.
doing it with a leg wound you also have is virtually impossible, and as much as Hershey tries, he just can't manage to keep up with the rest of the formation, and then eventually the interpreter comes back and tells him, leave him where he's at or I'm going to shoot both of you. And before Hershey can even think to decide what he's going to do in this situation, is he going to try to fight and save his buddy against a whole infantry battalion? Is he going to leave him? Is he going to argue with him and wind up getting both of them shot? And
Yeah.
before he can make a decision, Joe looks at Hershey and says, it's fine. Leave me. You did everything you could. And Hershey is forced to leave his best friend to die. From here,
Ooh.
Hershey is in the rear following this enemy infantry unit as they conduct combat
That's tough, man. That's tough.
operations for 2 weeks straight until they gain enough POWs to transfer him to a different unit and have him shipped to a POW camp. And during that 2 weeks, they do not feed him or render any medical aid whatsoever. After that 2 weeks, they finally get enough POWs that they are going to hand them off to a different unit and march them 400 miles further into North Korea, where there will be a POW camp. The officer that they're handed off to also speaks English, and he makes sure that each one of the POWs gets this sack that basically looks like a big tube sock, and inside that sack is rice and ground up barley that they unaffectionately nicknamed bug dust, and the officer informs them that this will be your weekly rations. You will have 1 tube sock of bug dust every week. Here's what you're supposed to do with it. You're supposed to take a big mouthful of bug dust, rinse it down with water, and it'll expand in your stomach and make you feel full. And that's all they have to eat for the next 30 days on their 400-mile forced march through the Korean winter up and down the hilly terrains of North Korea. And that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that they're not
Dude,
gonna give them
I'm not talking. I don't know what to add to this.
any actual fresh water, so they just have to get water from puddles, streams, whatever water they can find along the way. And all Hershey can think about
That's
is
brutal.
how he was told ad nauseum, whatever you do not just drink the water in North Korea, because in this part of the world they use human feces for fertilizer, so you're effectively drinking human shit. You will get dysentery and you will probably die. But Hershey doesn't really have a lot of options, so that's
Right.
what he does. After a month of forced marching eating bug dust, they make it to their POW camp, which is basically a small village in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, North Korea. And Hershey and 9 other POWs are assigned to a 9-foot by 10-foot hut where they're going to be living. Nothing in it, dirt floor, just 10 dudes in a 9-foot by 10-foot hut sleeping head to foot, shoulder to shoulder.
Right, yeah.
Around this time, Hershey and pretty much everybody else has still not received any medical aid, and he becomes very aware that he's not gonna receive any medical aid, so he acquires salt and rubs that into his leg wounds to try to prevent it from getting infected. Luckily, that works, and then they kind of get thrown into their POW life routine, and that routine is to wake up every morning. For breakfast, they get a cup, like a literal 1 measured cup of soy milk for their breakfast, and then they are force marched out to where there's a bunch of trees and forced to cut down trees for firewood. After they cut down enough firewood for the day, they're marched back, and then they have to sit there and listen to propaganda and brainwashing as the Koreans and Chinese guys force them to read communist pamphlets and material. And then
I mean, they're probably not going to fall for it, hopefully, but I guess it's an attempt.
Force them to sit around in a group like it's an AA meeting and talk about how horrific capitalism is and how bad America is and how this is clearly the better way of life, which is a bold strategy when you have...
I mean, listen, I'm not a big fan of America, even though I'm an American. But that's not because it's communist, or that's not because it's capitalist. Yeah, you don't want me to know my opinions about America and all. But yeah, I'll put it this way: Bad Electrician's a more patriotic guy than me towards America. I'll settle it at that.
He's sleeping in a hut with 10 other dudes, head to foot, shoulder to shoulder, while you're actively starving them to death, being like, you see how much your way of life fucking sucks back where you had a house and a car and a wife and kids and food? Yeah, this
right, yeah.
Caesar salad.
Obviously, Hershey and pretty much everybody else just isn't buying it, but they have to sit there and nod and be like, yeah.
Yeah, of course we buy it. It's like, no, you don't. You just don't want to get killed.
No, definitely. This is awesome.
Also, this is infinitely better.
That is his daily life routine for the next 26 months straight. 2 fucking years he goes through this bullshit.
Jesus.
And then one day, a bunch of trucks pull up to the POW camp, and they're like, get your ass on the trucks. And they're like, well, this is it. And all he can think about is like World War II, like, you know, Nazi death trains, like they're sending him off to the kill camp. Game over. But I mean, really, what are you going to do? You want to get shot here now, or you want to get shot at whatever the fuck they got going on at the other end of this truck? So he gets on the truck.
I mean, at least the truck provides you maybe, hey, jump out, roll into a ditch when the time arises, and they don't even bother going after you. They don't think it's worth your while, or their while, and you're able to make it back to friendly lines.
They're on the truck for days and days. And then eventually the trucks drive them to a place called Punjang, also known today as the Freedom Village, which is basically the dividing line between North and South Korea.
Right.
The Korean War is over, and this is where the Americans and the North Koreans...
it's armistice, so, I mean,
exchange.
Technically it's still going on today.
Prisoners.
Just
they get off
cold.
The truck, they get handed off to the Americans. The Americans take them. They get them a shower, scrub the shit out of them, trying to get all the lice and infection and nasty shit off of them. They give them food, medical attention,
right.
And then they get all the POWs into a barracks. And for the first time in 2 years, he gets to lay down on a bed. And as everybody's laying on these beds, trying to come to grips with reality that, you know, holy shit, I made it. This isn't a dream. I'm actually gonna make it back home to America. An officer walks in and calls Hiroshi Miyamura by name and tells him that the general wants to speak with him. At this point, Hershey's shitting his pants. He's thinking he's in trouble. Whatever happened with his men, whatever happened back on the hill 2 years ago,
right.
He's going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
Now he's going to go to an American jail. At least it'll be better than a North Korean jail, but you know, this still sucks. He's wearing pajamas and slippers because that's all the army gave him, and he walks into this general's office. Also worth mentioning, he's 5'10". He is my height, and he weighs 90 pounds. He has been so thoroughly starved.
5'10" for... 5'10", that's roughly my height. But that's pretty big even for a white guy. That's pretty big, so
So 90-pound, 5'10" Hershey walks into the general's office in pajamas, thinking he's about to get thrown in jail. The general of the 3rd Infantry Division then stands up, shakes his hand, and congratulates him, telling him that not only was he promoted while he was in a prisoner camp, he's also being awarded the Medal of Honor. Technically, he's already received the Medal of Honor. It's done, it's set in stone, it's been approved, because the last time his men saw him, they told the chain of command that he was engaging overwhelming odds by himself. So
he was probably given it posthumously.
that they could escape. And when they went back to do the investigation, they found 40 to 50 dead enemies, all credited to Hershey, 10 of which were killed by bayonet. So technically, on paper, Hershey had already been awarded the Medal of Honor over a year ago, but
Right.
they never recovered his body, so there was still a small chance that he was alive. So the American government issued the Medal of Honor, but classified it as top secret because they didn't want it to go out to the public, because if the Chinese communists found out that this
Oh.
badass named Hershey had killed 50 of
Okay.
them by himself, they probably would have killed him in his captivity, so it was classified. Hershey's
Honestly, something the government did competently. Don't out that there's this guy possibly captured. He's probably not going to make it to armistice if you actually let it be known that he did this.
shocked. I mean, he's happy, but he's shocked. He doesn't feel like he deserves the Medal of Honor. In his own words, he was just doing his duty. He didn't think he did anything special.
None of the Medal of Honor recipients, feel that way. I mean, which, that's what got them the Medal of Honor. They just did it. They didn't think twice about doing it. They didn't think about the fame or fortune or whatever deluded fantasy. That's what made the Medal of Honor recipients.
From here, his family's notified that he survived and he's going to make it home. He's then rushed back to America on a ship, and it is arranged for him to be the first one to walk down the gangplank of the ship to a crowd of cheering people and his family. He gets formally awarded the Medal of Honor by President Eisenhower. He goes back home to Gallup, New Mexico. They throw a parade. He's a local hero. He finds out that his own town, the same town that was awesome enough to demand the U.S. government not throw his family in an internment camp, also raised over $3,800 in the 1950s to give to him to
That would have been a lot of money back then.
help start his life back up after being in captivity for over 2 years. And from here, he just gets to go back to a normal life. He applies for a job at the local army depot. They never get back to him, so he takes a job working at an auto parts store in Gallup, New Mexico.
Okay.
And that's it. He gets to live happily ever after. He's back with Terry. His dad's still around. They end up having 3 kids together. He's raising the kids. He's achieved the American dream, the same American dream that he fought for. But then something amazing happens, because 5 years later, 7 years after he had been captured on the battlefield, he's at the auto parts store stocking a shelf, and he turns around and comes eye to eye with Joe Anello. And he turns paper white and just says, "You're dead." And Joe says, "No, I'm not. Thanks to you." And he then tells Hershey that he survived
What?
the wilderness right where Hershey was forced to leave him for 10 days until American forces came back and found him, and he survived. Joe and Hershey
So the Americans were able to make it back and all that.
remained best
Okay.
friends for the rest of their lives, and everybody actually got to live happily ever after.
Yeah,
Thanks
let's
for watching.
go.
The best way to support the channel is go buy
Everyone involved survived, lived happily ever after.
some merch.
That's the best part.
Links for all that's over at thefatelectrician.com. Quack
Okay, what's his little outro going to be at the end of this? Because I'm sure he'll
The
have
coolest
one.
part for me with these videos is
Yep.
that I've done so many now, I'm really starting to see a lot of overlap in them. Like, it's really cool to know so much about the Chosen Reservoir and about the 442nd Infantry Division, and then I learn about somebody
Yeah.
incredible like Hiroshi Miyamura, and he just has
True.
these cool cameos throughout these major events in histories. Like, he's got a cameo with one of the coolest units in American history, and then he's got a cameo with one of the greatest battles the Marine Corps ever fought, and then he rises and has his moment in history. And I don't know. That's just the cool part to me. The overlap.
I mean, and the thing is, he did compared to some other heroes that he talked about, he did very little. He was involved in maybe 2 or 3 engagements throughout his whole career, despite getting his start in World War II. And he didn't see active duty a single moment of that war, really, actual active duty at least. Sure, he was a POW guard or whatever, but other than that, and in Korea, he was only actually there outside of being a prisoner of war. He was only there for a few battles, and he was still able to have this one major accomplishment that made him the hero he was. So that's cool. He wasn't this consistent hero, so to speak, but I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But other heroes like Audie Murphy, for example, he had a presence throughout the war, throughout World War II. Whereas there was never that persistent presence for Hershey here, and he was still able to achieve, I guess you could say, a lot in just with one engagement. So yeah, that's cool.
Lap. See you guys later.